are we there yet? Surely there hasn't been a child in documented human history who hasn't asked his parents this question while being driven somewhere. The thing is, as we age and grow older, this question never goes away. It just changes. We need to know where we are on some mental map, and this is deeply ingrained within us. When I started playing piano a long time ago, I was plagued by one question every beginning pianist suffers through. When exactly will I graduate from beginner status and become an intermediate level pianist? How many more times must I practice my A-flat major scale up and down before this world recognizes my innate musical genius and bow down before my greatness? Well, just like knowing when you're getting old or when you love someone, there isn't a clear demarcating line between these categories. But in this video, I'm going to try and give my own personal answer as to what it is that makes a piano player intermediate level. In doing so, I will cover 7 skills that, if mastered, would definitely put you in the intermediate category in my view. I'll go over each skill, explain what it is, give examples, and also give you practice ideas on how to get a hold on them. Now, for the usual disclaimer, what I say here is totally my opinion. There is no universal checklist for being an intermediate level musician or piano player. My choices are also largely driven by my own musical preferences. I like modern pop and jazz piano, so I put an emphasis on related skills. A classical pianist would likely come up with a different set of skills, maybe a list of pieces that they would require you to be able to perform for you to qualify as intermediate level. Having said that, let's get straight to it. The first skill is being able to identify any interval between any 2 notes on the piano up until major 10. So for example, you might be given, say, 2 notes, and you should be able to immediately say that these 2 notes are, in this case, a perfect fifth apart, which is 7 semitones. Now, a semitone is just the distance between 2 adjacent notes, so you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and here you have 7 semitones, and there are names given to the different intervals, which you can see now on the screen, and you need to know these names. Now you need to be able to do this quickly, so if I give you something like this, you can say, this is a major second, because this is 2 semitones, right? 1, 2. Or if I give you something, let's say like this, then this is a minor 6, and it is 8 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So intervals are the first and most basic skill that you need to get a hang of to be considered, again in my view, intermediate level. The next skill is scales. You should know how to play 4 different types of scales. Major, the most important, and then 3 types of minor scales. The natural minor, also called the Aeolian, the Dorian, and the melodic minor. You should be able to play these in any key. Now there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 12 different notes. So you do a little bit of math, and you come out to 48 scales. Sounds like a lot, and it is actually quite a bit of a, let's say, hassle, but it is important to learn all of these and memorize them. Not only that, but you should be able to play any of these 48 different scales in any of your 2 hands, either separately or combined, 2 octaves up and 2 octaves down. For example, simplest example, a C major. So right hand alone, left hand alone, and both hands combined. don't have to be a speed demon. You can play them in the speed I just played them. And it's more important for you to play them evenly and with equal force to each key. Make sure that you don't sort of cut corners or that the hands don't go out of sync with each other. Now you might be wondering, well, how would I know which fingers to use to play each scale? And thankfully, there's an easy answer to this. There are books that have scale exercises that you can go and consult, and they have fingering as well. The most famous one is available for free. It's a book of exercises by a pianist called Chords. You can instantly find this on the web just by Googling the name. You can also look at the video description. It's free, it's in the public domain. Download it, print the relevant exercises, and practice them. The next skill is triads. Now, as with scales, there are different types of triads. There's major triads or chords, minor, diminished, augmented. So, it's a long list, and we haven't even gotten to the seventh chords and more advanced chords. However, it would suffice for beginners to just get a hold of how to play two types of triads, the majors and the minors. Now, to build a triad, you pick the root, let's say C. You count up 4 semitones, which is a major third, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 3 semitones, which is a minor third. You see why intervals are kind of important when you communicate? Now, the resulting chord is a C major chord. If I choose A flat, and I count a major third up, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a minor third, 1, 2, 3, I get an A flat major chord. A minor chord is pretty much the same, but it switches the major and minor intervals. So instead of doing a major third, minor third, now we're going to do a minor third, major third. So a C minor would be start with C, count up 3, 1, 2, 3, count up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And here's your C minor. And just one last example, let's do a G flat minor. G flat, also called the root, by the way. Count up 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's your G flat minor. Now, again, there are 12 different notes, so there are 12 different major chords, 12 different minor chords. And you need to be able to, when someone tells you, play an E flat minor, immediately, without any delay, be able to play the corresponding E minor chord. Or play a B major. Or E major, G minor, D minor. So anything anyone throws at you, you need to immediately be able to play the appropriate triad. The next skill is inversions and voice leading. Now, we've spoken about triads, and you have 12 majors, 12 minors, so that's a total of 24. Now, I'm going to complicate this a little bit for you, and let's take a C major chord. Now, it remains a C major chord even if we move the notes around in octaves. So I can take this lowest note, the C, and move it up, and I get the first inversion of the C major chord. Now I can do this again, take the E, move it up, and I get a C major chord in the second inversion. And a third time, take the G, move it up, and I'm back at the root form. So in total, I have the root form and 2 inversions. And this is universally true for any triad. There are 3 different basic forms, the root and the 2 inversions, that you must be able to play or memorize. Now, again, we can do a little bit of math. There are 2 types of chords that we've spoken about, major and minor, 12 keys, and 3 forms, root and 2 inversions. So 2 times 12 times 3 is 72. So you need to memorize 72 different forms and get them under your belt. And again, the recall needs to be instantaneous. For example, let's say I tell you an E flat, and I say root position, or if I say second inversion, immediately. And the way you see this is, you take the root, you move the lowest note up 1 octave, and then the lowest note 1 octave, and you get the second inversion of E flat major. Or D minor first inversion. And this is the D minor, take the lowest note, move it up, and you can see that this is the first inversion of D minor. Now a good exercise for getting this under your belt is just picking any note, any type, major or minor, let's say A flat minor, and then playing through the different inversions. You don't need to be very fast, you just need to feel comfortable. This is a little bit about technique, but it's more about memorizing the different chord forms and types. Strongly related to the study of inversions is the study of voice leading. And voice leading refers to really being able to attach chords or play the chords that flow into each other in the most natural way. And this means minimizing the amount of motion between chords. You want as many notes to remain stationary as possible. So let me give you an example of what it is I mean. Let's say this is a C major chord, and I want to play a C major and then an F major. Now, I can play them in their root forms, but it would make more sense for me, let's say if I start in the root form of C, to play the second inversion of F major. So this is my root form, first inversion, second inversion, move it down an octave, and I get something like this. And this works because, or this sounds good, because it has a common note, the C. So it kind of minimizes the amount of motion when you change between the chords. Now, you should be able to really play any chord progression in a way that minimizes the amount of motion between the voices. And again, this is something you need to be able to do instantly. For example, if I tell you, well, play a C major to an F major to a G major, and then a C major, what would you do? Well, there are many solutions depending on which form of C major you start out from. But let's say you started from the second inversion of C major, then I would maybe play C major, second inversion, F major, first inversion, now G major, root, and C major, second inversion. Another example, let's say I'm doing a C major to an A minor to an F major, to a D minor to a G major. A little bit longish, but I can play this maybe in the following way. You see how I smoothly transition between the chords. Now when you start doing this, you're going to have a hard time because you're going to first of all have to memorize all of the inversions. And then you're going to have to figure out instantaneously which inversion is going to give you the smoothest voice leading, which inversion is closest to the chord you're currently playing. And this requires practice and diligence. It's not going to come naturally, it's not going to come immediately. But if you keep on working on this, it will eventually come. Now there's a good way of working on this, which is basically pick any song that you like, make a list of songs, and go through the chords. Just download the chords from the internet for the song, and then try to play the chords in, again, a way that has smooth voice leading, that minimizes the motion between the chords. And it's okay to sit down with a sheet of paper and a pencil, or for you more digitally oriented folks out there an iPad and an Apple Pencil or something, and really just notate to yourself step by step, which chord am I playing, which inversion, which notes are or static or remain the same as I change the chords, and just work it out like a puzzle. And the more you do this, the easier and faster it will become. Okay, the next skill you should master is arpeggiation. Mainly left hand, but also right hand. And the idea is that for any chord and any inversion that you play, let's say a D minor in the root position, you can take the middle note and move it up an octave, and you get this nice voicing, right? And let me do it down here maybe. And you should be able to basically, if I tell you a chord and the inversion of it, root, first or second, you need to be able to play the corresponding arpeggio. You could do it in 3/4 or 4/4 or any pattern that you want. Or let's say a G major, take the middle note, this is a root form, move it up an octave. D minor root form, G major root form. This is great for playing melodies in the right hand. Now, any inversion will give you a slightly different arpeggio. So let's say a G major in the first inversion. Take the middle note, move it up an octave. And here I have an arpeggiation of G major in the first inversion. Or I can do an arpeggiation in the second inversion. G major second inversion, middle note, up an octave, D minor, As with practicing any of the other chords, a great way to do this is to pick songs that you like and play the chords in an arpeggiated manner. So let's say, usually you'd probably play ballads because this is kind of a slower thing, but let's say you take something like Bohemian Rhapsody, right? And let's say you play it, I forget which the original key is, I think it's B flat major, so now I'm playing the root form arpeggiations, but you should try to find better voice leading. And so on and so on. The next skill is a theoretical one and has to do with something called functional harmony. Functional harmony deals with how to build chords on scales, usually major scales, but not necessarily, and how these chords flow into each other. For example, let's play a C major scale. We number the notes on the major scale from 1 until 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is 1 again. And these are called degrees. Sometimes you'll see these degrees being given funny names. Tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, and leading tone. So these are just funny names, don't think too much about them. Now, in functional harmony, you start out by building a chord on the first, third, and fifth degrees of the major scale you're in. So for the C major, this would be 1, 3, and 5, C, E, and G. This is just a C major triad. Next, what you do is you move this shape up the scale. This is called planing, and it creates a set of chords. Let's name them. This is C major, D minor, built on the second degree, an E minor, built on the third, F major on the fourth, G major on the fifth, A minor on the sixth, and a B diminished on the seventh. And then we're back at C major. Functional harmony talks about how the chords built on the different degrees follow each other. The strongest motion is a 5-1, playing the chord built on the fifth degree, which for C major it's a G major, for the C major scale it's a G major, the dominant, and then playing the chord built on the first degree, a C major, or also called the tonic, so a G to a C. Obviously you'd use inversions to make sure the voice leading is smooth, so you might play a G to a C or a G to a C, something like that. Another common motion is a 4-5-1, which in the key of C is an F major to a G major to a C major. So in jazz, you'll often hear people talking about 2-5-1s, which, again, in the key of C, is a D minor to a G major to a C major. So when you get into maybe jazz down the road, you'll use more advanced forms of these chords, which is outside the scope of a beginner, but you might play stuff like a 2 to a 5 to a 1. So D minor 11 to a G7 sharp 5 sharp 9 to what would be a C6-9. But that's for the future. This is not part of the basic beginner skill set. Now, what exactly should you practice here? Well, the idea is that in any of the 12 different keys, you need to know by heart which chord is built on which degree. So for example, if I ask you what's the 2 in C, which is short for what's the chord built on the second degree in the C major scale, you should immediately know that it's a D minor. Similarly, if I ask you, let's say, what's the 4 in E, then you should be immediately able to say A major. So let me just convince you that this is the case. You build the E major scale, which you should know how to do by now, by the way, because you've already practiced your scales, right? You number the degree, the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You build the initial chord on the 1, 3, and 5, that's an E major, and then you plane it up. You get a set of chords, E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, and D sharp diminished, and back to E major. So the chord built on the fourth degree is indeed an A major chord, and I can say that immediately because I know my functional harmony, right? So there are 12 major scales, each has 7 notes, so this means you need to memorize 84 total chord types, right? And you have to practice these and know them by heart. There are no ifs and buts about it. This will really open up your understanding of theory and your ability to communicate with other musicians. And once you start doing this, you will start thinking in terms of degrees instead of notes. And this will help you see repeating patterns in music all around you, right? You might say something like, so Radiohead uses a 2-4-1 in High and Dry, or Queen loves using 3-6-2-5-1s in many of their songs. Now, the best way to practice functional harmony, really, instead of except for just sitting and memorizing the different degrees and building the scales and so on, is simply to analyze existing songs that you like. So pick any song you like and write down the scale. For simplicity, stick to songs in major keys. Functional harmony can be extended to minor scales, but it's slightly more complex and probably something I would put beyond the beginner level. So next, write down the chords of the song, either by ear or you can just look them up on the internet. And then identify each chord according to its degree. Let's do an example. Let's do the beginning to Bohemian Rhapsody, right? So this is a song in B flat major. And it goes, I guess everybody knows this. So you get B flat major, G minor, C minor, E flat major, and F major. So what do? You build the B flat major scale, you build the major chord on the root, on the tonic, that's a B flat major, and then you plane it up. So you get the chords B flat major, C minor, D minor, E flat major, F major, G minor, and A diminished. So now we can go back and analyze the chords in the song. This is a B flat major, so it's a 1. A G minor, that's a 6. A C minor, that's a 2. An E flat major, that's a 4. And an F major, that's a 5. Pretty nifty. Now, some chords in some songs will not fit into the simple functional harmony framework, which is fine for starters, right? If you would, let's say, in a song built on a B flat major, suddenly see a C major chord. Well, that's not part of the set of chords we've constructed in the scale. But that's fine. If there are chords that don't fit, just don't name them. The point is to, it's less to categorize each and every chord and more to get yourself used to quickly thinking in terms of functional harmony for the chords that do fit into the scale. Just keep doing it and magic will happen, I assure you. The seventh and last skill should almost be trivial if you've gone through all of the other skills and mastered them. And this skill is transposing. This means that you need to be able to take any chord progression and move it any number of semitones on the keyboard. Let's say I have a progression going from a D major to a G major to an A major to a D major. Well, if I tell you now play it 3 semitones up starting from F major, well, or maybe play it 6 semitones down starting from an A flat major. Now the reason, by the way, this is so easy for me is that I don't think in terms of chords, I think in terms of degrees. I'm playing the initial progression in the key of D, and then I'm just playing a 1, 4, 5, 1. So if I tell you instead of D play 3 semitones up, then I know I'm in F major. I know what my 1, 4, 5, 1 are in F major. They're F major, B flat major, C major, F major. And because I know my triads and inversions, I can immediately play them. Now practicing this is almost, fairly trivial, well, not in terms of difficulty, but in terms of just challenging yourself. Take any song in any key and just play it in any other key. Just challenge yourself, play Bohemian Rhapsody starting in an E. Right? Just be able to transpose anything from any key to any other key. This is something that beginners don't really appreciate enough. And it's very easy to not transpose and just use the transpose button on your keyboard. That's okay when you're starting out, but transposing will really open up stuff for you. And the reason for this is that, well, you'll immediately be able to play with other people in any key. You can just very quickly, when you say you're playing in a band, move to any other key. You can play on an acoustic piano, of course, and acoustic instruments. And more importantly, you can start thinking about modulations within your own piece. So you might play something like, well, I'm already thinking ahead. Let's say if you're playing jazz, you're playing a 2-5-1. And then you can play a 2-5-1 immediately in a different key, in E flat. Then you can go back to C major. I'm just doing the same thing over and over again, just in different keys. And I'm just transposing stuff. Again, this will really open up your playing, and I think it's a little bit glossed over, but it's really a critical skill that all pianists and keyboard players should have under their belt. Well, that brings us to the end of today's lesson. I've covered the 7 basic skills I think are crucial for progressing, let's say, from a beginner to an intermediate level. I've left many things out, by the way, right? For example, we didn't talk at all about 7th chords, and I consider 7th chords and chord extensions and more complex harmonies and voicing something that is a bit more intermediate in its nature. You, by all means, should explore it, but wait until you master or feel comfortable with triads and simpler chords before you go to more complex harmonies. Again, we haven't really talked too much about technique. A lot of the technique will come by practicing scales and triads and inversions and arpeggiation, right? Arpeggiations will require you to stretch your hand. Scales will require you to develop some dexterity and hand coordination. So a lot of the technique will come by practicing the skills I've already laid out. That's it for today's lesson. I hope you've learned something interesting, and I'll see you next time.